What is up, guys? Troy here, and today on this special episode of Battlefield My Thoughts, we're covering the state of Sony. A few weeks ago, we covered the state of used games and their possible future within the gaming community. This week, we'll start episodes 2 through 4, where we will cover the three console manufacturers, Microsoft, Nintendo, and starting with Sony and the PlayStation brand. But before we get to that, let's talk about the gameplay. Talon Market, Rush Defense. It was actually a pretty good game. I had quite a bit of a fun time, and I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, but the night I was recording this, I was actually quite mad because I had gotten back on the PlayStation 3 console side after a multi-week absence, and actually ended up rage quitting. I was placed on quite a few bad teams that just didn't want to play the objective. The frame rate was really starting to frustrate me to no end, so I quit. I jumped on the PC side and ended up taking out all my frustrations on anyone who happened to be unlucky enough to spawn in on the opposite team as myself. And this game actually really showcases an idea that I'm going to use for the next Battlefield winning ways. When I was playing back this gameplay footage as I was editing it a few days ago, it really showcases how to hold down two lanes at once when you're one person. And of course, we all know the ideal situation is to have one lane held down by one person, another lane held down by another, and those 2 or 3 or 4 people communicating within each other. But we all know in pub games that tends not to be the ideal situation. Most other players tend to be off in their own little world, oblivious to things that should be obvious to most people. So you as a player tend to have to pick up slack and do extra duty for the people who aren't willing to do it and play the objective just that much harder. So I will be talking about my thought processes in the next Winning Ways episode on how to hold down multiple lanes at once and combine different gameplay mechanics in order to be successful and more combat effective within the game. Now on to the commentary, but before I start the commentary, I do want to state 2 things up front. For one, of course, yes, I will be linking the various articles in the description that back up various points that I'm going to be talking about within this commentary. The next thing I want to state up front, for full disclosure, is the fact that the only consoles I've owned besides the original Nintendo Entertainment System and the Nintendo GameCube are, of course, all 3 of Sony's PlayStation consoles. I don't want to come off as a Sony fanboy. I'm not a Sony fanboy. My primary gaming platform is, of course, PC. So let's get started with the commentary. Now, we all know how E3 went last month, and the fact that Sony is actually riding this PR wave of success, but really the reality of the situation is the fact that Sony is in quite a bit of trouble, and has been for some time now. Now, when I say Sony is in trouble, I actually mean the entire company, not just Sony Computer Entertainment, which of course is the division that's responsible for the PlayStation side of the company. Within the fiscal year of 2012, the Sony Corporation lost an estimated $5 to $6 billion, which was, of course, was the 7th straight quarterly loss for the company at that time. Now, not all of these losses can be attributed to the PlayStation 3 and its disappointing sales and its lack of previous success when compared to the original PlayStation and the PlayStation 2. Other factors, like the competition from other companies along the lines of Apple, Google, LG, Philips, Samsung, and of course Microsoft, just to name a few. Some problems outside the company's control were also contributing factors, like the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami in the year 2011. That certainly had a huge economic impact on not only the world, but a lot of the companies that were based in Japan, Sony included. Now, myself, along with everyone else, back in the year 2005 and 2006, were eagerly awaiting the release of Sony's next console in line, the PlayStation 3. At that point, Sony was hitting all the right notes, not just in the marketing side of things, but also in the delivery of their product. They, of course, were coming off the success of the PlayStation 2, which in my personal opinion is still the greatest console of all time. Not just by sales numbers, but by games library and the gaming experience. If I were to rate my gaming experience, I would put the PlayStation 2 as having a richer and far more deeper experience than even my time with the PlayStation 3. Now, the PS2 was so successful that it pretty much destroyed any goal of home gaming console dominance that Sega had and that Sega had always sought against the companies and likes of Nintendo. With its massive install base from the success of the PS1, the PS2 could do no wrong, as long as great games and a great gaming experience were delivered. And they were, and it was. Now with this in mind, everyone thought that the PlayStation 3 was basically poised to end any thoughts of a console war before one had even had the chance to get started. I remember an article from the magazine PSM, PlayStation Magazine, back in 2005, that said nothing short of an asteroid strike on Sony headquarters is going to stop the PS3 from being the home gaming console king for the third straight generation in a row. Looking back, it's actually hard to believe that Sony and the PlayStation brand have fallen from their once mighty throne of console dominance, but they have. The PlayStation 3 has pretty much been characterized by misstep after misstep by the PlayStation Corporation, or by the Sony Corporation, and Sony Computer Entertainment, that have prevented the console from becoming as successful as it could have been. Now, these missteps that have characterized and plagued the PlayStation 3 are quite numerous, but I will talk about a few of them. One of them being the addition with the PlayStation 3 of high bandwidth digital content protection, which is also known as HDCP. Now this is a feature that basically encrypts any data being transmitted over HDMI, and this created headaches for me when I tried to record my gameplay with an external capture card. You cannot use an HDMI cable to record any gameplay through an external capture card on the PlayStation 3. You can do that on the Xbox 360. Another thing that was quite lacking is the lack of multi-channel input and output audio on the PlayStation 3. This creates a headache as well when recording, but mainly for trying to record the in-game communications and live game commentary when certain games. That's why you'll never hear any in-game communications on any of my old PlayStation 3 videos. It's possible to do it, but it's quite troublesome in the first place, and doing it on PC is just so much easier. PSN has certainly a less robust online presence when compared to Xbox Live, and we certainly saw that in 2011 with the hacking scandal, and we saw how vulnerable the PSN was, and the fact it was out for basically nearly 2 months, and PlayStation and Sony lost quite a bit of money on that. But Sony also has a lack of basic features on the PlayStation 3, things like a bundled headset, a lack of basic social features like party and cross-game chats. Other things that have characterized and plagued the PlayStation 3 are a price point that is twice that of the PS2, mainly because the internal hardware, the proprietary cell architecture, and the addition of the PS2 motion chip engine, which basically allowed for backwards compatibility for nearly all PlayStation 2 games in the console's early days. A lack of large and varied launch titles to the start and launch of the actual console was certainly a big problem. I did not buy the system until 4 years after the PlayStation 3 came out. I didn't buy my PlayStation 3 until 2011. I certainly wouldn't have bought it back in 2006 with the lack of games. But one bright point in all this is the fact that they've actually pioneered and led the way with the adoption and standardization of the Blu-ray media format, which other console companies now like Nintendo and Microsoft are adopting for their next generation consoles. Sony does seem to be trying to correct a lot of the mistakes of the past with the PS4, but at this point I'm very cautiously optimistic about their future. The PS4 as of now is not an open and shut case of success for Sony. They've said a lot and they've made a lot of headway in the PR and marketing side of things, but we have yet to see what they can actually deliver in terms of a great and robust gaming experience. And while all of this seems dire and somewhat dreadful, they're not as in a bad a position as other companies at this point, companies like Nintendo. Sony does have experience being the leader of the home gaming console manufacturer in the past, and only time will tell on whether they can gain that position back or not. We're basically all in this wait-and-see mode, as I like to call it. Well guys, those are basically my thoughts on the state of Sony and the state of the Sony PlayStation brand. While it does seem somewhat bad, and it certainly could be a lot better, hopes are certainly high for a much brighter future for the PlayStation brand. And that's going to be it for this commentary. I really appreciate you guys watching the rest of the video. If you guys want to give me a like, comment, subscribe, I'd certainly love to hear from you guys how you feel about the PlayStation brand and how it's affected you and what you'd like to see for the future. Remember guys to check out Friday's video of Battlefield 3 Winning Ways, where I'll give my thought processes on how to hold down 2 lanes at once with being 1 person and 1 player with any certain game. And I appreciate you watching the rest of the video, and as always guys, take care.